Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have a special guest. She's the author of the book It's Not You, It's Me, no other than Miss Rosemary Gattuso.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to Book 101 Review, Miss Rosemary. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name's Rosemary Gattuso, and I'm a family mediator from Sydney, Australia. And I'm also a chronic overthinker. And so I've kind of merged these two parts of me to share ways to really overcome overthinking and ways to manage adversity. And I've been a mediator for about 13 years, mainly working with separated families. And I guess a main part of being a mediator is that my role is really to help guide a conversation. It's not about making a judgment or an assessment or anything, or giving an opinion. Even it's about being non-judgmental, and that's really, I guess, the key difference between a traditional legal system and then the mediation process, and also key theme throughout my book about how can we be our own mediator and show ourselves non-judgment.
Miss Rosemary Gattuso, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. And what is alternate dispute resolution? And how is
Well,
differ from, you know, traditional litigation? Oh, yes.
and I mean, I've already touched on that a bit. I mean, most people are familiar with the traditional legal system. You might have watched shows like Law and Order and other types of legal shows that show the us versus them, where you have to prove that you're right and the other person's wrong. And there's only one real solution, and there's a third party, which is the judge or the magistrate who makes a decision. Whereas mediation is quite different, where it's about having a third party neutral come in and sit down with parties who are in dispute to really help them come up with an agreement that is going to, in theory, be something that all the parties can live with, and it's something that takes into account the individual circumstances and situations rather than the evidence that was given. So it's not evidence based. Evidence is brought up, but it's really about, well, moving on and looking into the future. How can these, typically in my case it would be separating parents, how can they co-parent respectfully together?
So, what are the main types of ADR and how are they used?
Well, I guess the main type is mediation, but there's also restorative conferences and arbitration, and essentially it could be a negotiation, any sort of process outside the legal system that is aimed at drawing a conclusion or finalizing or coming up with an agreement. And sometimes it doesn't actually come up with an agreement, but it still has some kind of um, finality or settlement of the situation, closure of the situation. Um, but yeah, there's quite different types of processes that might involve solicitors or other experts that help the process. But essentially, it's about someone who really doesn't have as much of an input in the final decision, helping to guide that conversation.
So, how does ADR promote faster resolution of dispute compared to the court proceedings?
Well, I mean, sometimes generally it's a lot easier to find a mediator and then go through the process, assuming it's suitable. Because I work with families, and there's a lot of screening that I have to do, so to make sure that it is safe to continue and that there aren't any circumstances that would mean that maybe an evidence-based process is more appropriate at this point. But um, but it's generally a lot quicker and a lot cheaper. because
Yes.
it's instead of waiting. I mean, in Australia, there's quite an extensive backlog in the family court system. So, you'll be, it could take years,
Yes.
depending on the situation. And I mean, urgent cases do get quicker, but it's still a process, and there's a cost as well. So whereas mediation can be a quite smoother process and a lot cheaper, more efficient and cheaper.
Faster, efficient, and cheaper, people. So ADR is highly recommended. So it's you, no, it's not you, it's me. Is it included the topics that we're talking about?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the concepts that I propose in terms of being strengths based in our own reflection and helping to transform overthinking into strengths based reflection, they're based on my work as a mediator, in the sense that it's based on my observations in the way people handle adversity, because I started to see trends in the way people think and negotiate with each other, and really handle life's challenges. And and that really helped me to at times even predict the outcomes. And it's less about the specific situations of each family, but more about the lens or the perspective of those involved. And as a mediator, I also work using a strengths based approach. And having that strengths based sort of theory and background in my mind as I was working and seeing these trends, it really allowed me to categorize what I was seeing. And essentially, if I apply strengths based theory, it says that all our thoughts, feelings, and actions, or anything we do, situations, and the way we see things, can either come under what's wrong or what's strong. So we are able to name what's happening. And I guess what I noticed is that in cases where the situation seems to be a little bit heavier and more challenging to move forward, there was a tendency for the default lens to be to highlight what's wrong. Whereas those where they were able to overcome their adversity a little bit quicker and have a future focus, then their tendency was to stay with what's strong more than they looked at what's wrong. And the difficulty is, going through a separation, it can be easier to focus on what's wrong. So it's quite challenging, and for some it's our default. But that's essentially what the book is about, using this strengths-based approach to help tame and transform overthinking and self-talk and self-criticism into reflection and empowering growth, because we can make mistakes, but we can also learn from our mistakes.
Definitely. What's wrong and we can solve it. Where is wrong? Right,
Yeah.
Miss? So, what is the role of mediator in resolving disputes?
Well, I guess my role is really to help hold a space to have that conversation. And that starts before the mediation, because I would always meet with clients individually in private first. And part of that is to determine whether or not mediation should go ahead, but also to help them prepare so that they know what's ahead. I mean, typically a mediation would last 3 hours. And I mean, like any situation, the better prepared you are, the more chance of being productive and efficient, or at least being able, and that might be also just getting across what you want to say, even if there's no outcome. So the process starts in that kind of coaching and exploration of what's important to that specific individual, and how they want to raise that in the room.
Definitely. So, it's not you, it's me. Can you share to us your favorite chapter of this book?
Hmm. I've never thought about a favorite chapter. That's an interesting question. I have to think about it. I do like, and often I find myself referring to the last two chapters, which look at the sort of troubleshooting and tips to help when, I guess, putting in practice the concepts of using strengths-based theory to everyday life. And some of them are, practical tools. For example, one that I use a lot is to help us transform a negative assumption into a strengths-based, concept, or even just to help eliminate those negative assumptions. Is to, for me, I had a legal background, so I draw on my legal background and say, well, let's use the rules of evidence when our overthinking starts to go into overdrive and we're making negative assumptions about things that might even stop us from making decisions or even trying something, because we've already assessed it and decided that something bad is going to happen, or if I don't do something now, someone else is going to do something bad and I'm going to be worse off. And so what I noticed is that, I'm quite guilty of this. And so, but essentially, there's no evidence for these types of assumptions. So drawing on my legal background, I kind of say, well, if there's no evidence for a thought, an assumption that I'm placing a lot of time and effort to and taking it on board as if it, was true, if it's not admittable in court because there's no evidence for it, then I shouldn't really put or think about how much weight I'm giving it and how much anxiety and stress it's causing me because I'm relying on it. So it's not relying on inadmissible evidence, particularly when it's causing anxiety and stress. And that's the last kind of two chapters get into more practical ways and strategies to help keep the focus on the what's wrong and the what's strong lens, and help that troubleshooting.
I think, Miss Rosemary, this the good chapter of the book, the best chapter of the book. So, how does mediation ensure neutrality and fairness in the resolution process?
That's a really good question. I mean, I'm only human, so I can sit down in a room and say, my role is not to take sides or give a judgment, or make a judgment or give an opinion. But sometimes in my head, I might be thinking, oh my gosh, I wouldn't do this, or I don't, how could they say that, or how could they, and I guess the challenge is to keep it inside without letting it show outside. And sometimes that is harder than it sounds. And what I noticed with me is, if I use the what's wrong and the what's strong category, when I'm showing judgment, I'm really going towards what's wrong. That's what would typically happen in that judgment style. So then what's the opposite of judgment that would put me closer to what's strong? And so that would be to show understanding. So I kind of think, well, how can I show understanding to this family and their unique style and characteristics and the way that that family has always run? And I'm here just for a few hours to help them have a conversation. So, and what I found is that in times where maybe I didn't personally think that agree with what they were agreeing with, then sometimes I might delay the process and not even realize. And then it's until I think, hold on a minute, this is their life, this is their story, this is their answer, this is their solution. There's no safety concerns. So I need to show more understanding.
Definitely empathy and understanding, I guess. So, what are
Yeah.
the essential quality of an effective mediator?
Well, I think it's about being um, a good listener, number one. And a good listener is able to, listen with non-judgment, listen openly, and ask curious questions as well, because we don't just listen with our ears. It's really that, how do we show that we are listening, and listening with respect, and listening and acting almost like we are a witness. We aren't giving a judgment, we aren't giving an opinion. It's just, this is what we're seeing, this is what's happening, and asking those very curious and non-judgmental questions to help move things on, or sort of steer it towards the direction that that family are going towards.
Definitely. So, how can parties prepare for a successful mediation session?
Well, I mean, preparation is quite important, and that's, as I mentioned, part of the first step. You meet with your mediator, and they will go through with you, or I go through with my clients in terms of what's important for them, what's their worst case scenario, what's their best case scenario. Have they had legal advice? Legal advice is really good for everyone, I say, going into any sort of dispute, because it's good to know what the alternate is if there's no agreement, or even if there is an agreement, so that you have all the information before you decide. So even if you agree to something that's completely different to what would happen in court, well, you've made that decision on your own and you had all that information with you. So really important to link in, and even if it means getting financial advice or accounting advice, and getting any sort of support that could help. And particularly, me working with families, it's there's families who are going through separation. So there's also that emotional element. And so that's where I would also encourage, clients to reach out to other services and professionals, and organizations or communities that can help support them in that grief and loss process and the emotional side. And sometimes that's just, exercising self-care and aiming to have a more balanced life.
Definitely. So, it's not you, it's me. If you want to revise the book itself, which part of or which chapter or part of the book you want to revise?
Um, hmm, I'm not sure actually. I mean, the more that I speak to people about it, the more ideas I get about the book in generally, and think, oh, I could add this or I could add that generally. And I think I've got enough extra sort of material to write, the next book. Um, but hmm, I'm
So
not, I
there
have to
there
think.
will be a follow up for this book.
Definitely, yes.
Looking forward for that, Miss Rosemary. So what are the potential outcomes of mediation and are they legally binding?
Well, and outcomes to mediation are not legally binding, but they can be made binding. So, clients, I mean, this is through the Australian legal system. So, and limited to, well, not necessarily limited to family, but that's, where I'm working. Um, because agreements made in family mediation are not legally binding, but then they can be taken to a solicitor or lawyer to then rewrite into the correct sort of legal format, and then being made into consent orders. And it's because it's what two parties have agreed to, and they're asking the court to make it binding. And so
So
then you have that extra, I guess, weight, so that if there's non-compliance with the agreement, then you can go to court.
yes, certainly. So how does arbitration differ from mediation in terms of process and outcome?
Well, I define and view arbitration more as a private legal system, in terms of a private court system, because it's more about getting um, expert opinion, expert advice, and evidence. So, in that sense, um, yeah, it's. I mean, I have limited experience in arbitration, but that's how I see it. It's a privatization of the court system, and it still can be more efficient as well. And you're dealing like, and you'll have you know industry specific arbitration as well. So that can also benefit parties, in that it's not a mediator who knows nothing about that industry.
Very well said. Miss Rosemary. Very well said. So, what is the role of negotiation in alternate dispute resolution?
Well, essentially, I mean, negotiation is an ongoing part of it. It's what we do in mediation. I guess mediation is can be seen as maybe a structured negotiation because as the mediator, I would, you know, help the parties will make an opening statement, which could be a list of topics of what they want to discuss, and then I would then, make a list of topics that covers what both parties want to say. And so then we go through topic by topic, and everyone has a turn of choosing a topic. So it's quite contained or structured as well, and with the option of flexibility. But that's generally how things work. And then in between is the negotiation. I mean, even sometimes the process deciding which topic to go to first. I would give them each a turn. Sometimes that can be a negotiation in itself.
Definitely. It's not you, it's me. What are your expectations?
Well, I guess I'm hoping that it'll reach the people who are interested and looking for a simple but deep tool to help guide their reflective process and also empower their growth, because it's not about me saying you should do this or this is how it can work. It's more about providing the concepts and then giving practical ways and reflection tasks for readers to then apply it to their own situations and their own life and in their own time and pace.
Yes, definitely. So, Miss Rosemary, what are your advice or what's your inspiring message for those aspiring writer out there that having the same genre?
I would say, I mean, it's taken me quite a while to get my book out there, and I went through so many different types of processes, and then ended up self-publishing um, and using print on demand. But the key thing for me was linking in with consultants or people in the industry and even organisations. I mean, in Australia we have an organisation or a society for authors, which I found incredibly helpful and incredibly resourceful, because even if I don't know where to look for a reputable editor or needed, relevant legal advice in relation to publication of a book, they had all the information there. So I would say connect with industry knowledge and associations or societies that are able to either provide the help or link you in with the help.
Yes. So, what are your short term and long term goals in writing?
I guess short term, it's really about really getting my book out there. I'm doing a lot of author talks in libraries and bookstores, and also running workshops in high schools to help, I guess, high school students, mainly with, anxiety and self-criticism. So I'm just really trying to get out there as much as I can, and share the concepts with anyone who, is, feels aligned or interested in what I have to say. And I guess then more long term, it would be about getting the second book out there that really draws on and expands on the concepts in the first book, but most likely with a focus on self-esteem and the sense of self.
Miss Rosemary Gattuso, thank you so much for sharing It's Not You, It's Me to the world. I hope more empowering books like this to come. So, Miss Rosemary, can you please invite our listeners to support your book?
Yeah, sure. That would be great. Just come to my website, or link in with your local bookstore and if they don't have the book, they'll definitely be able to get it, or you'll be able to get it online.
Yes, yes, people, let's support Miss Rosemary Gattuso, because if you support her, as I said, more empowering books to come. So, Miss Rosemary, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. It's been great chatting.
More to come, people. See you soon. So, Miss Rosemary, this